Well, hello, my name's Elijah Henderson. I'm with Cryptid Studies Institute, and today I'm joined with my dad, Johnny Henderson.
Hello, son. How fares your day?
I'm doing fair today. How you doing?
Well, it's hot, and I'm sweating profusely right now, and I really wish I wasn't. It's about a heat index of 90. Way too early for 90 degrees.
So those of you who are watching know we're in our hometown of Dayton, Tennessee. It's located in Ray County, and it's located at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah, we're about 36 miles northwest, I think, of Chattanooga. There's no greater place on the whole face of God's earth as far as I'm concerned. And son, you've asked me some questions several times around here about different things, and I tend to not like to be on camera. I'm the founder of Cryptid Studies, and Elijah's been right there ever since his knee high to a grasshopper, and um, grew up in it. And we'd partnered with somebody a long time ago, and things just didn't really work out the way we'd hoped so we kind of went our own way. And Elijah took over the helms as a full-fledged partner then. And as you can see on camera, he's a lot more handsome than I am. So I try to make him our front man. I want him out front. I'm getting older and it's harder for me to get around. I have Lyme disease. And I don't know if you know a lot about Lyme disease, but it is absolutely a monster. Can mimic up to 350 different diseases if I'm remembering correctly. And every year I get a little slower, a little fatter, a little sicker. So I want to have him gradually taking it over, and I want him to be our front man. So I have him helm all the Nightmare Nuggets. I want him as our face. But sometimes, he'll ask me about different things. I have got years of experience on him and years of tales that he don't know about. And sometimes he will ask me about that. And while we're down here in my hometown, I thought we'd maybe try to record a little bit of the local folklore, and because the town is rich in history. As a matter of fact, growing up, this house over here was one of the most feared houses around. Now, I never seen anything go on there, but it was almost public record. Get that out of my face, son. What are you doing?
Trying to get clean audio.
Well, you get clean audio, but you get it clean out of my face. And but this house you can see in the background over here, many people had an irrational fear of this house. They said that it was like tremendously haunted, like you'd almost think it's a portal to hell the way they talked about it. It used to be gray, but it's always looked that way. Same design, not a lot changed structurally, just the color. But the house has over the years become a little eatery of some sort. And a couple years ago, maybe not quite that long, we were down here filming a Nightmare Nugget on
I believe it was Devil in the Woods.
Devil in the Woods is exactly what it was. And I was telling you about the house then, but while we were out here, a little waitress come up and we were talking about us filming, and I asked her about the house, told her, people used to say it was haunted. And she told me that to this day, that when they're working there, they hear doors, sounds like they open and close, and people moving around when there's no one in the house. So it still has a tendency to have a record of being some sort of paranormal activity in this house.
Right.
And the town is steeped. You can hear some gentlemen here working around.
I believe they're spraying the grass and whatnot.
Yeah, I believe so too. But the town is deeply steeped with local lore and legend and superstition. It's not uncommon to see tons and tons of blue houses, blue porches, or part of the house painted blue.
In fact, we've seen a couple of blue houses on our way over here today.
Yes, and a lot of people don't even know why they do that, but the color blue they use is actually called Haint blue. It's literally named Haint blue now because so many people years ago believed that spirits couldn't cross the water, so they would either paint their house blue or their porch blue or some segment of their house that they wanted to keep spirit free. And even today, people still are using this Haint blue on their homesteads. But a lot of mystery down here. There's a home here in town that you probably won't hear it outside of Ray County, but there's one house here over close to the river, or to the lake rather, where no matter when you pass by, they've always got a light on in the house. It's on the bottom floor, and what everyone says is this house, the people that live there, they lost their daughter in a tragic accident, and after she passed, they buried her with her high school ring on, or some piece of jewelry. And when they got home, the item of jewelry was found in her room, and they found occult symbols in the room, and they would hear noises and things of a frightening nature in the house. And they had a local pastor, Pastor Wilkie, and some other men come over. Now this is further out than I would even believe, but apparently something happened. I don't know.
It's kind of become town lore at this point.
Yeah, yes, it has. They began a praying this demon or ghost or whatever. They was in there. They was trying to exorcise the house, and like I said, there's all talking and a praying, trying to see if they could get this house clean. And for whatever reason, they said, now again, I wasn't there, and this is just town lore, but it's always told as truth. And everything usually in town lore has some grain of truth to it. But they said that whatever was in the house manifested in almost a physical, or in a physical form, like a big blackish shadow thing, and the men, these religious men, was able to wrestle it out of the house and get it in a car. And they got it way out in the country on the far side of town, and it overpowered them and got out of the car and ran off in the woods. And from that time, they started having a series of animal mutilations in the area, and I guess to this day they still occasionally have something that's killed.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but we are told by a certain individual that one variation of the story, the spirit ran off toward a cave, and
yes,
there's a trailer park in that region now, and
yes,
they've had weird activity.
Yeah, the trailer
day.
park has still had weird activity. I've got that whole conversation, where they were telling this recorded, but I don't know that they would really take kindly to us outing them in public, putting their names there, because people down here are to some extent still superstitious. They don't like you flouting their business to anybody. They don't like having their names brought up. People don't like telling you their names, because in the occult world, if you give your name, or someone has your name, it gives them power over you. And that's just one of those things, that you just don't do. You don't go spouting a body's business out here.
Right.
But the town is steeped in mystery out here. We've got another person who lived in a house just up Evansville way, who they built their house out of reclaimed timbers out of an even older house, and the timbers that they used supposedly came from a house where an individual was said to have been possessed by the devil or a spirit or something. And after he passed on, they tore the house down and used it to build their house. But the house that was built, they would sometimes hold seances, and things are said to have moved around in the area, in the house. And one of the occupants was deeply in love with an individual, and they wanted, they'd do anything to be with this individual. So they allegedly, and have even told people, that they sold their soul, made a pact with Satan, or Lucifer, whatever you want to call him, in an attempt to win the affections of this individual.
Right.
Well, the sad thing is, they actually did get this individual, but only for a short time, and then they broke up. But the individual in question, after she made this pact, her life was miserable for years. She eventually, became a Christian and changed her life, and hopefully things worked out. I believe it did. but she would say that something big and hairy, it kind of looked like a hog, would come at night and sit on her chest and strangle her. And she claimed to see what looked like an Indian spirit standing at the foot of her bed. But the thing that would come and choke her is all hairy and hog-like, and its face was wrinkly like a pig or something. And this thing badgered and tormented this woman for years.
It's like she got what she wanted briefly, but
She got what she
paid
wanted,
a price
yeah.
for it.
She may have lost what she had. You don't dabble in the supernatural.
No, never.
And that's just a few stories here, but people are, I could take you to several cemeteries around here where there are granny witches buried. I know we done a video on granny witches, but some of them, we've even had members of our own family who were granny witches. We know these old mountain women who they'd do a lot of spells. They could do things with burning bread or pictures submerged in water, and use a lot of grave dirt, sending people grave dirt through the mail or sprinkling grave dirt on. A lot of things involve using grave dirt around here. Even this morning, I guess I'm still superstitious to some extent. I shaved my head this morning, cut my hair, but I didn't even leave the hotel this morning until I made sure that I gathered up all the scraps of my hair and disposed of them, because there's so many things people can do with your hair if they get a hold of them. So being here in the mountains, I know a lot of this stuff to be real, so I just don't leave nothing to chance.
Well, even one of the highest points you can really access and hike over in Pocket Wilderness, called Buzzard Point, we even found occult symbols painted up on top of that rock up there.
Yes, we did, and there is supposedly a place out here where and I've never found it, but I had someone who told me that they would take me there sometime, a place where they would kill witches years ago that they suspected of it, and they call it the witch pits. And so far I've not been able to locate it, but I'm still looking for it.
And you can't quite tell from the angle that we're sitting at right now, but right next to us on our left, my left and his right, is the mountain where Devil in the Woods took place. This is the mountain where that took place.
Yeah, that rocky outcropping where the creature was standing is just up there above the sky, tree line somewhere.
And as an extra little bit of interesting history, we've had family members throughout our time. There's an old cave somewhere out on that mountain, and one of our family members lived in it for a little while.
With his family, yes, sir. And then just up the highway there, right over here, going up Lone Mountain, is the location where a lady several years ago claimed to have saw a wolf man of some sort standing there. You can still find our nightmare nugget, Dayton Mountain Wolfman or Werewolf.
And we actually remade that in better quality, because the original, we filmed it alongside a busy highway, and you can find that on our website, cryptidstudiesinstitute.com, in the video section, along with a couple of other remade ones. One from this general region called Pitty Pat Holler, and that's a very interesting one. It's from Shipley Holler Road, right?
Yes. I lived out there growing up for a short span, and all them old timers out there, when it got nighttime, they made sure they was heading towards home. But if they was off visiting somebody, they did not want to walk them roads at night. They'd tell you, if you're out here and you're walking this road, you'll hear something walking behind you, making this little pitty pat sound, as it walked behind you, try to jump on you. And a lot of people over the years have claimed that this thing stalked them up the road. There's cases of it getting in someone's wagon years ago, jumping on the back of somebody's horse. But yeah, people were very, very frightened to be out after dark up at Pitty Pat Holler. And there's all kinds of hills and hollers and gaps up here that people are they just don't get out and mess around too much at dark.
No.
We when I was little growing up, we'd stay out at my Aunt Myrtle's house. Now Aunt Myrtle, she used to be very, very superstitious, and it goes back to some of that mountain magic and custom. If she was canning and a gal come to her house, a woman walked in her house, she'd be like, "Honey, is it your time?" And if it was your cycle, you did not come in her house while she is canning. She said it would cause the food to go bad.
And the milk to blink. Correct?
Yeah, well, no. If milk blinks overnight or goes bad and spoils overnight, it's considered there's a witch in the area.
Oh, my mistake.
Yes. A witch coming to your area would cause your milk to blink. Like if it's fresh milk and then all of a sudden it just went sour, it's caused there's...
For no particular reason.
Yeah, there's a witch in your area. But there's a really awesome book, you know. It's a book on witchcraft. I don't really try to recommend witchcraft books, but this one's on Appalachian magic. It's called In a Graveyard at Midnight.
But it also kind of gets into a lot of the folklore as well. It doesn't seem to be just based solely on how to do spells or anything like that. It seems to get into the history of the mountains too a bit. Right?
It really does. So growing up here, you know, I always had a passion for, I guess, the macabre, the weird and the strange, because I grew up around the macabre, the weird and the strange, you know. There's nothing for these old granny women to have like jars with crushed up insects in them, and they could take these insects and slip it to you in what you was eating or drinking and kill you dead in a hammer, and they wouldn't even be able to trace the poison to know what killed you. I don't know what kind of insects or anything, but I used to know one lady that actually had this jar. I've had some of these granny women, you know, these granny witches, tell me that yes, they did have power and they could kill you with it if they wanted to. They just didn't want to go to hell, so they didn't take it that far. But some of them, however, do take it to the extreme. I remember one old lady around here who could heal. When I was just a little fella, I got thrush really bad, and my family took me to her, and she blew into my mouth, and it cured the thrush that I had in my mouth. So not everybody that practices it's a bad person, you know. Sometimes it's a strange mix of Bible verses like faith healing and witchcraft.
Right.
Almost other types around here is like someone had crossed up powwow and
the Celtic magic.
Well, the Celtic magic and like Indian magic, and mixed the two. And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There's even perpetrators of voodoo of sort. An old gentleman I was talking to one day was telling me how. And I don't know how it ended because, you know, when I was a teenager, I really didn't pay that much attention. I just ignored a lot of what they told me. He told me that he woke up in the middle of the night, and there's a black gentleman, and he had a pan of rocks, and he was a thin pan that was full of gravel and rocks, and he was shaking it over his face and doing some kind of ritual. And like I said, I don't know how that ever turned out, if he just, you know, left on his own, or if the guy had to extricate him from his home or what. But there's a lot of strange things go on around here. You know, they used to tell about a Black Panther out here towards Bogle's Chapel, I believe, somewhere out in that direction, that black as pitch. You go down to the water and it'd chase you, but if you shot it, they said that it would just kind of glance out of it. The shot would just glance out, and by glance out, I think they meant almost like the bullet evaporated into it and there was no harm to it. But people were terrified of this panther.
Now tell me, which one of the mountains was it up here that it happened to one of our family members, but they described a bear trying to climb up into their wagon?
Yes, that was my grandpa and my great-grandpa, and they always told that they were coming down the mountain. I want to say it was Dayton Mountain. It's possible it could have been Evansville. I'm not certain. But I reckon my mama remembers it from when she was a little girl. Now, these are old country men. And they said that they were coming down the mountain in a wagon. And I think there's somebody else with them. But said this bear come out and was trying to get in the wagon with them. And they shot it. And they said the bear stopped and started pulling wads of hair out and packing it in the hole where they shot it. And then it would keep coming trying to get into the wagon with them.
But to be able to pull hair out, it would have almost had to have a thumb.
Almost had to have hands. So I wondered, they're not around to ask anymore. Everyone I've told to, everyone I've discussed this with, said they've never heard of a bear being able to do that or having done that. Almost everyone I've ever mentioned to immediately said, that sounds like some kind of cryptid, like a Bigfoot or a dog man. Now, being old timers who seen something big and hairy in the woods, they may have just thought they were seeing a bear. But, bears generally don't try to climb up in a wagon either. So I'm wondering if they had a cryptid account and they didn't know it, because I don't even know of anybody that's ever heard of a Bigfoot or a dog man pulling hair out, packing it in a hole.
That's kind of unique to itself.
It is, but it happened several times. I don't know how many times they shot it, but it is multiple times. This thing, it'd keep trying to get in the wagon, they'd shoot it, and it'd keep coming. So this thing had determination, I can't imagine that a bear would keep coming after you've shot it a few times.
Right, no.
But had the intelligence to pull hair out and plug the holes. Now that's something interesting.
Absolutely. And another thing I was wondering, and if this never happened, we'll just cut this out. I was wondering, it seems like I heard some unusual story from the Gulf. And the Gulf is an area a little further down from Pocket Wilderness. It's an area attached to that. But I seem to recall something from the Gulf.
I believe it was a Bigfoot sighting or two, that someone seen Sasquatch up in the Gulf. And, that's just a few hundred yards as the crow flies away from Pocket Wilderness.
And really not far from where we sit right now.
No. I hate to use as the crow flies analogy again, but that's only about 2 miles as the crow flies.
Right.
And but we know that there are Bigfoots, I guess is the proper term, over in the Pocket Wilderness, because one of the gentlemen associated with the park literally told us, and we got it on film, but we'd never put it on film because we wouldn't want the gentleman to lose his job, that he has 3 big feet in the park. 2 black ones and 1 large red one that's very aggressive.
And according to him, there's in Pocket Wilderness, and we probably mentioned this in our videos a while back, I can't quite remember, but there's a ventilation shaft in Pocket Wilderness, because it was an old mining company, and
wasn't it the Dixon Slope or something like that?
The Dixon Slope mine, yes, I believe it was.
Yes, and it collapsed several years ago, like about 100 years ago, maybe more. And they say that you can still hear voices and stuff coming out of that mine, but the ventilation shaft that's left, people have about 5 times, I think the gentleman said, reported to him that they saw one of the Sasquatch coming out of that mine shaft.
And it's full of water down in the back. It only goes about probably 50 feet, you think? 40, 50 feet?
Yeah, somewhere abouts.
And it's full of water in the back, so I don't know if it's going in there using it as some kind of a den or some kind of a water source.
Well, I mean, we've never tried to go through that water, If you duck down, it may open back up in there,
That's true.
It'd be pure speculation on our part, or something to that effect. But, people down here, they got a rich, lavish history, There's great things down here, There's a spot here in Ray County called Old Washington that one of the town historians told me a fascinating story about it, that for one day or part of a day, that Old Washington was actually the nation's capital. I can't remember what the course of events was that made that happen, but for part of a day it was the nation's capital. And then Jesse James used to spend a lot of time here in Ray County. Actually spent time with one of my relatives, on his farm. And just down the road a piece, as you get towards Graysville, there's a farm down there that's purported to have a lot of gold buried on it. So there's just a huge, rich, warm history with the people here and the culture. One day, I hope to take the time to sit down and write a book about the county and some of the fascinating tales Got to be careful what I tell, because a lot of people and family members wouldn't be happy if I went to blabbing about their private business.
No, I don't think they'd care too much for it.
No, they stop thinking of me as family and just classify me as some sort of old peckerwood, but I don't want to be that.
Yeah, the land here, it has a beautiful history. And, the Native Americans actually used to traverse this land a lot, and you'll find a lot of pottery and arrowheads and stone tools down by the rivers. And even occasionally you'll find bones in certain areas, but that was years back.
Yeah, we'll probably take a little jaunt out there in a few minutes and show the riverbanks, and maybe talk a little more. I don't know, and go back out to the cemetery. I want to show you something when we get back out to the cemetery, but we'll get into that later. All right, Elijah, we're out here now at Bly's Ferry at the Cherokee Removal Center. I want to show you out here because this is an amazing, amazing area out here. Growing up my whole life, I rambled and wandered all these little sloughs and tributaries, and wandered these banks and looking for arrowhead and artifacts in the fields along the way. I picked pumpkins out here. Courted my first women out here along these banks when I was camping. It's great memories along these riverbanks. But for years, the land's been tied heavy to the Native American culture, Indians, whatever. I'm not politically correct, but out here, down this way down the river, is Hiwassee Island, where I believe it was Sam Houston actually lived with the Indians for a while out there. So it's got a great, rich history, with not just pioneers and settlers and trappers, but politicians like Sam Houston, Indian chiefs, and just amazing people here. But I came here because I used to walk up and down these riverbanks and would go artifact hunting, Indian artifact hunting. And growing up, almost everybody out here, they probably got a skull or pieces of a skull or bones and stuff that's washed out along the riverbank. And we was no different. We'd collect arrowheads and things. And one time we took home a bag of bones, and it sounded like at night something trying to claw a hole through the bottom of our trailer. And living down here, we got spooked. And somebody said, "That didn't start till you brought them bones home." So we put the bones outside and it stopped. Brought them in, it started again. So we took all that mess and took it up to the college and donated it to the historical college up the road here.
Where it may be their problem now.
Oh, probably. Well, they need to be treated with respect,
Oh, absolutely.
But, being down here and being, at the time, a little hick, we didn't respect it the way we should have. But when we treated it with respect, the noises stopped, and who knows, it could have been a cat up under the house, but still made us think a little bit different. I will tell you an oddity, though. We were way up the river up here. Used to be a place where we'd hunt arrowheads down on the river called, well, it wasn't really called anything. It was owned by a fellow named Chick Harris. And Chick would let us go back in his property and hunt artifacts. They'd plow up the riverbanks, Like I said, I used to pick pumpkins and such out here on the riverbanks too. But I think they had corn up there that they had planted. And we were walking around the plowed field. The new shoots were just starting to come up, And it was almost like big sky country. You just see a huge sky above you and just fields as far as the eye could see. But I was walking around out there, and it sounded like Indians chanting, singing. And I thought I was about half nuts, imagining it, because I was on Indian land. But I walked around a while out there, met up with my teammates that was out there hunting as well, and we got to talking, and lo and behold, you know what they heard?
I imagine they heard the same
The
drums.
same thing, the drums and chanting and singing that we heard. Now, I have no clue what was going on out there. I don't think that they were doing Indian powwows anywhere, but it was just very unusual. And I'm not a big ghost story guy because I don't believe in ghosts.
Right, neither do I.
I do believe in demonic entities and things of that nature, spirits that will try to trick and deceive you, but I cannot explain the Indian drums and singing along that riverbank.
By any normal scientific methods.
No, I cannot. But, you follow those riverbanks up through there, and that takes you on up to Bogle's Chapel, pretty close to where that panther was that they said that you shoot it and it would glance out of it.
And all these Indian bones up here, that's going to be the Melungeon Indians, right?
Melungeons are something else. Melungeons may have some Indian blood with them, but there's something else.
They're a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And so a little bit of interesting tidbit of information. We know that we've actually got Melungeon in us because we actually have
a feature to the back of our skull.
There's a little bone knot that protrudes out of the back of our skull, and that's one of the ways you know that you have that in your DNA.
It's a defining feature of the Melungeons. It's a Melungeon knot, and you and I both have that knot.
Right.
Now, you've heard me talk about the gentleman that lived here, Alvin Goins.
Oh, Alvin Goins was amazing.
Alvin Goins was, I think the word for it would be an idiot savant. He was just an old country man. You always see him. He had tobacco dribbling down his chin. Hat somewhat similar to what I got on right now, and a big old heavy coat. Rain or shine, winter, summer, it didn't matter. He was always wearing that coat. And you'd ask him, you'd say, Alvin, ain't it too hot for that coat? And he'd go, tee-hee, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. But what was so amazing about Alvin, and I'm getting off subject here, this is a cryptid video, but Alvin would, you could just tell him when you were born, the month, the year, and the time, and within just a couple of seconds, in his head, he'd figure up how many seconds or how many minutes old you were. And when they were building the Nashville Capitol down in Nashville, they, for whatever reason, they couldn't come up with how many supplies that they would need to build it. And somebody had told the architects about Alvin and his ability with math. And they asked him how many bricks they would need to do the project and build the Capitol. And he come within 3 bricks of guessing it.
For an entire building.
For the entire project, and told them 3 bricks. Alvin Goins was amazing, but if you saw him on the street, you'd think he was just some old hobo. But the Appalachian people, they are not a bunch of savage, inbred idiots. They've got their own culture, their own way of handling things, their own private justice, their own liquor, their own dancing, their own courting. They're just amazing people.
Their own methods of gardening.
Even the ones I grew up around that couldn't read or write, they were brilliant. They could do crafts that nobody else could. They could take big slabs of mountain stone and make round buildings out of flat rock. They just do amazing things. Just the abilities that they had. And just because they lived along these mountain ranges, people just really had a low opinion of them.
Right.
Most of them were just very, very stringently religious people. Most of them had vocabularies out of this world, A lot of times people harass you and I because we use a lot of big words. But that's the nature of the people here, I don't know why that is, but they'll use their own dialect. Like I've had to really train myself to speak normally, or I slip into my home dialect and you wouldn't really recognize what I was saying. But hey, when you's coming over to the house, I'd use the word yuns all the time, and working with the public, people are like, did you say yuns? And I'd be like, no, I said yuns. 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 But, so I had to kind of practice to talk more like people in town. And
Well, believe it or not, we're based out of Clarksville, Tennessee, and even though it's still part of the South and part of Tennessee, the dialect is much different, and the nature of the people is much different there too.
oh, it is. I love being down here in mountain country. I don't like being really in Middle Tennessee and around West Tennessee. When you start getting around flatlanders, they act a lot different than highlanders and mountain people do.
Right.
They're just entirely different. And we'll go to a restaurant and just be ordering our food, and they often make a bit of sport of us because of the way we talk. And that's us trying to talk more like them.
Yeah.
And but down here, people have their own way of speaking. They're very relaxed. But they don't tell you their business very often. But when they do, if you here in a minute pan over there and get that mountain range, there's so many stories and tales of people seeing things along that mountain range or in those foothills or out here in the wilds along the riverbanks.
The whole landscape is just lush with not just oddities, but just unique stories, things you just wouldn't normally hear.
And there are huge amount of creature sightings around here. And but I just wanted to bring you over here and show you this area. And there's a lot of wild America still left right here. Now, every year, I hate to say carpetbaggers, but I guess technically that's what it is. People retiring from up north, coming down here and buying up mountain land, and getting rich, off the
Really
fruits
taking
and stuff
advantage
of the southern
Southerners.
people. Because they think they're ignorant. No, they're simple people. But yeah, there's I would love to get some of these people to open up about their accounts, things they've seen.
I'd almost be willing to bet that most of the people out here have had at least one unusual thing happen to them in their lifetime. At least
Yeah.
one.
Well, I'm gonna tell you something real quick. I don't know that if I've ever told you this or not. We was out Aunt Myrtle's house one time, and she'd been, spinning yarns all day and telling about ghost stories and whatnot. And somewhere along the middle of the night, we heard the awfulest bunch of howling and barking and dogs, just sound like they're being torn apart. And Myrtle and some of the other adults, they looked out the window and they started screaming and carrying on. Oh Lord, it's a Hain, it's come to Hain us. And then they kept watching. They said, "There's some out there and it's killing them dogs. It's tearing them to pieces." And they called all the neighbors, and the neighbors come pulling up in trucks with guns and everything. They was like, "What is it?" They said, "I don't know. It's got a big old head and it's just tearing these dogs apart." And when the neighbors got down there and they tracked it down, it was one of the poor old mangy dogs that we had out there that somehow had got its head hung in a cut-off milk jug. And it looked like it had this great old big head, and it was running into the other dogs trying to get that jug off its head.
That's purely amazing.
It is, but Myrtle thought there's a haint done come to hang us. So people down here, the belief in haints and creatures is very real. That instance, it was just misidentified.
And the belief is very widespread as well.
Oh my goodness, yes it is.
And I believe Haint Blue isn't just localized to this region, but across like the whole Appalachian region. Isn't it?
All the way even down to Louisiana. I think there's Haint Blue painted on Marie Laveau's grave, or all around it anyway. The voodoo priestess queen.
Right.
But yeah, Haint Blue is a very big thing down here in the mountains. But a lot of people don't even know or remember why they were afraid of, or why they used Haint Blue. A lot of people no longer remember a fetch or a Bob Wowster. Now, years ago when we'd be out in Myrtles in the wilderness playing, she lived not far from where there used to be an old sawmill in town, and there was a family there who had like a Sasquatch problem that would come along and steal their hogs. But back in the 70s when I stayed with her, we'd be out playing, and there'd be some kind of creature hollering in the woods off in the distance, and they'd tell us, "Now y'all stay close to the house today, don't y'all go in the woods, there's a Bob Wowster out there." Now, they didn't know what a Bob Wowster was, but it sounded scary in the woods, and they just made up a name for whatever it was. And now that I've grown up and got into the cryptid industry of the business, now I know now that those were the roars of like a Sasquatch. I remember them very clearly, but they knew to call them a Bob Wowster.
Right.
And I thought that was a pretty interesting story there that you might find funny.
That's extraordinarily interesting.
I guess we've wasted enough time here. We need to be pushing on and head on back to the house. But we'll stop by the cemetery. This weekend for us down here is decorations. We're gonna drop some flyers off for our family members, and
decoration is a bit of a custom up here. You decorate the cemeteries and the graveyards.
You remember your fallen loved ones, and you decorate and clean up their graves, and just sort of honor the dead. So we're going to stop by the cemetery and put some things on my daddy's grave and our families. And I wanted to show you a couple things there, because here a while back, you done a nightmare nugget on a varmint they called the
grave robber.
The grave robber. And it's not grave digger. I don't care what a bunch of people up north want to call it. It is a grave robber.
Absolutely.
But the thing, down here we've always known what it was. It looks sort of like an anteater. And never seen one, but I have seen the evidence in the cemeteries around here where the thing had burrowed through graves. Sometimes it would burrow in and eat dead bodies, push up bones and things of that nature. Sometimes it just burrow down in there and make nests in the coffins.
And pull up the flags from around the cemetery and just make a little den inside.
That's why a lot of times in cemeteries you'll see little stone houses over like graves that help to keep them out, or little wooden buildings built there to try to keep these grave robbers out. It was a big thing in mountain culture. Everybody knew what it was.
Even was it Huckleberry from Mountain Monsters?
Mountain Monsters, yeah, was talking to Huckleberry about grave robbers, and he knew exactly what they were. But some other time we'll get into some graveyard stories, because a lot of witchcraft involves going into cemeteries at midnight around here. A lot of people are terrified to go in cemeteries. One gentleman claimed that he was walking past a cemetery, and one night one of the graves was just blazing with looked like a bonfire, but it was just almost green as grass, the fire coming up off the grave. And it spooked him quite severely, but it made a big impact on him. But there's a lot of spooky stories about cemeteries down here. But like I said, I guess we'll pan over, see the landscape here, and then we'll head on out to the next location.
All right.
All right, Elijah, we're here now at one of there's probably 3 or 4 cemeteries in town that's primarily your people, your kith and kin. Now, this is probably the main cemetery that has your family in it. And growing up, I've been here and I've seen the evidence of the grave robber. I'll take you up here and I'll show you around. One of these graves, don't get the headstone. It just seems disrespectful.
I won't.
But let's go up here and we'll look around. Look at this little grave house here. Now, throughout Appalachian, the mountainous areas, you'll find a lot of these little grave houses here, that have an added layer of protection for the grave, for people's loved ones, designed to weatherproof them, just show prominence, and also to protect them from varmints like the grave robber. But it didn't always work, because one of these graves in this death house here actually used to have you could look in, see the hole going down where the thing would burrow in.
Right.
Actually, several of these graves I've seen it in, but I won't point out the graves because it could be upsetting, to whoever's loved one it was.
Right.
But if you're looking inside here, when you first come in the grave house, this one right here used to have, it was more on this side, it seems like, that the hole went in and went down. But several of these graves in here was molested by the grave robber. But yeah, there's a lot of your family and history here, you know, and it's kind of a custom that's dying out to have decoration, like we discussed earlier.
Right.
But you know, here throughout Appalachian, the mountains, you know, we are who we are. We still try to respect our passed on elders and such, our family. And it's just a respect thing. But I thought I'd bring it here and actually show you a cemetery where the grave robber has actually been at work.
And unfortunately, it seems like they've almost gone extinct, or just so few of them now, nobody remembers them, or...
Well, I heard somebody trying to perpetrate the myth that they had the last one died out in the 50s. Well, I know that not to be true, because in the 70s I saw where they was burrowing into these graves.
Well, in the 70s, this town was still so obscure that, I mean...
Oh, it was. In the 70s, it really had to feel like stepping 50 years back in time. And you see how much nature is still here today, and how simple and I don't want to say backward, but standoffish that some of the people are today. It was even more so then.
And it still looked like when you come here, you step backwards in time.
To some degree, yeah. You know, I noticed while we was here, they got a Zaxby's and a
Burger King.
A Burger King, but we didn't even get a McDonald's here to either 84, 85, somewhere along there. You know, so progress is still coming here, unfortunately, but it's not coming as fast. You know, it's still a place of mystery. There's still plenty of Haints stories and creature stories. You know, you've got dogman-like creatures up on the mountain. You've got Sasquatch-like creatures. We ourselves almost hit one of those little hairless dog-looking chupacabras up on Dayton Mountain.
Right, one of those.
About 4 or 5 years ago.
Looks like a dog covered in mange.
Mm-hmm. Sure enough. You know, there's always stories of panthers out here. You're not far from Pitty Pat Holler. You know, you've had reports of a wild man up in Rockwood, on Spring City Mountain, Sasquatch sightings.
Meigs County, right?
Well, yeah, Meigs County, but that's over across the river.
Okay.
So there's still plenty of wildlife here, cryptid wildlife, and we recently talked to a gentleman who saw a dog man in DeKalb County over near White County, and Crossville. There's always people sighting them in Crossville, Livingston. So all this area here in the mountains around, from like Livingston on over this way, it seems to be heavy with, you know,
well, you recall
stories.
Another friend of ours that he's into carpentry. I'm not sure if I should mention that or not.
Well, you can.
But he's
very outdoors.
I know
yes.
He's had limbs and rocks thrown at him.
Yeah, he saw the big shape running through the woods. And remember a couple years ago, someone sent me like some kind of picture where somebody here on one of the mountains, either Graysville, Evansville, or Dayton Mountain, had saw like Bigfoot up on the mountain. So, yeah, there's still a lot going on down here, but there's so many caves and rocky outcroppings, things of that nature, where any kind of cryptid wildlife could hide. A lot of nature, you know. There's bear here, there's alleged panther here, cougar here.
Definitely mountain lion.
Yeah, mountain lion. That's cougar and panther, you know. I've seen coyote here. Goodness, about anything you can imagine. And even alligators have started pushing forward or further north from Florida. They even found an alligator out here in the river not long ago.
Well, we were told also that they found piranhas here.
That is an absolute fact. You know, park ranger told us that. So,
I think
I love being here because it is still a piece of wild America. It's sort of nestled between, a little less than nestled, but between Knoxville and Chattanooga. You know, along these mountain ranges.
It's almost like one of the last frontiers when everything
is, you know, but
built
again,
upon.
these newer generations, you know, their grandparents and their parents die off and leave them land, and it don't mean anything to them anymore.
No.
They just see a chance to make a quick dollar, and they're selling off their land. They're, you know, stripping the hillsides of the timber and just clear cutting everything they can. Just developing apartment buildings and subdivisions, just really destroying a lot here. And I even heard that Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton were thinking about coming out here and buying up something and making like a Dollywood. I really hope to goodness that doesn't come to pass.
I absolutely hope that falls through.
It's beautiful here. So what happens when you find a beautiful spot in the mountains? People come here and they want to try to corrupt it. You know, hey, we need to make this a big urban development.
It's
no,
all about a dollar.
You don't. Leave it alone. But it'll always be a place, you know, a home place for me, and mystery place. You know, a lot of special memories down here. And if I talk for days and said I told you that all these stories, I'd be wrong, because I just can't remember them all. There's just so much that's transpired down here.